The next talk will be given by Rege, who is a professor in Information Security Group at Royal Holloway. The talk is about applying ethnography to cryptography, and in particular, how to build protocols to adapt to the specific needs of protesters in Kenya.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Rege. I am an ethnographer, as I guess people have gathered now. And I'm here to talk about this work that is joint with Martin, Simone, and Ben, who's in the room. And they are cryptographers, so, it's all good. Just as a warning, just as we start, in content warning, I will be talking about fieldwork, examples from fieldwork, and that also includes examples of abductions and torture. So just be mindful of that. But to get us started, as a departure point for this thing that I'm talking about today, I want to talk about, first of all, our starting point of social foundations of cryptography, what does it actually mean by that? And with Jean-François Blanchet, who has been a starting point for us in our conversation, who cites Goldrake for saying that cryptographic practice proceeds, I think, basically very rigorous in its definition, and these definitions are capturing natural security concerns. And what Blanchet is questioning is, well, what are natural security concerns? And that is where the cryptographic literature is silent. Actually, what do we mean when we say natural security concerns? And the kind of rigor that we as in cryptographers, use in our definitions. Okay, so that is right. So with Blanchet, we ask, what are these natural security concerns? Where do they come from? And our answer is that, how do we then actually understand natural security concerns? How can we capture them? Our response is with ethnography. And we, based on ethnographic findings, and this is what I'm going to talk you through as well, what our findings are ethnographically, we initiated cryptographic study at Compromise Security. So why ethnography? Why should all of you care about ethnography? First of all, it's cool. We do, well, I guess I say that, but also what ethnography does really well, and what is kind of put in the world to do, is to understand, explore social relations in the naturally occurring settings. So where they exist, not in a lab, but in the field that we talk about in ethnography, of what people do, ordinary activities, not just the spectacular ones, but what do people do every day? How can we capture that? So what I will talk, so that's social foundations. I'll talk to you, give you the setting that we study, which is a particular setting. I'll give you the research method and the design of that, and how it relates to cryptography. And then we'll talk also about the findings, and finally, at Compromise Security, at blindness, our security notion. Okay, so the setting. So we kind of covered that to some extent now. How do we choose it? Not necessarily. So for this particular setting, it was the anti-finance bill protests in Kenya that happened in 2024, specifically starting on the 18th of June, 24 in Nairobi, and then spread very rapidly across Kenya. And these were unprecedented large-scale protests in Kenya, to the extent that there was protesters from both the poor, working, and middle classes, which was very different from any other protest in Kenya. So while street protests have a long history in Kenya, the fact that these were like a diversity of people coming together to oppose the establishment was also seen as a threat to the establishment. And this makes them quite different from previous protests. From day one, the protests were met by violent responses from state security forces. People were killed, injured, mass arrest. And then we also saw the emergence of abductions, which is where we focus our work, which I'll come to in a second. But even though the Finance Bill 24 was withdrawn on the 26th of June because of the pressure, protests still continued until, like smaller scale protests continued until 8th of August. And in my field notes, so one thing that ethnographers do, we keep very detailed field notes. And one of the things I wrote in my field notes on the 25th of June, which was a pivotal moment, a pivotal day in these protests, was that this was a moment of revolutionary relief, where protesters that had swept the streets, I was in Nairobi, breached the fence of Parliament, entered Parliament and entered the Senate. And I think this quote really captures this quite nicely, how people had come together. I'm so happy. This is not just the poor, but this is everyone coming together. So there was a sense of like, yes, revolutionary relief, but we've done it. There was this like a really short moment of time. But of course, as usually is the case, they haven't. So very quickly, protests were killed outside of Parliament, even more were injured, and we saw President William Ruto, going onto national TV in the evening and calling protesters criminals, and also the act of breaching of Parliament as treasonous. International forces condemned it, or they publicly urged restraint for the Kenyan security forces. So that's kind of the setting. I have some pictures that was taken during this time, just so to kind of highlight that. But our focus is on the abductions that started to merge, or that surged during this period of time. So never before had activists, protests in Kenya, experienced the threat of abduction. Arrest, sure. I mean, multiple arrests, sure. But abductions and torture, not. So this was a new security threat that they experienced during this time. So at the time of the fieldwork, they were also coming to grips with this new adversarial landscape, trying to come up with practices and protection strategies to how to keep ourselves secure, safe. And I think it's important to mention, I'll mention this again at the end, that many of those who were abducted are still missing. And what we also saw during this time was abduction squads, snatch squads, that were being set up with key intelligence, military, security units that monitored locations of protesters, specifically targeting those who were seen to be influential. And we saw coordinated abductions taking place, specifically in the morning of 25th of June, but also more generally. So this is new. And we will see that when we come to some of the findings as well. But let me talk through what we then did. So ethnography is not just data collection. It's also a way of understanding, interpreting, analyzing then what you collect. And for us, we established a technique of introducing ethnography to cryptography. And through this, as I mentioned before, what can ethnography learn from, or what can cryptography learn from ethnography? We argue that we show that we bridge this methodological gap in cryptography to establish realism. Yeah? So the natural security concerns also that we started with. And it's through this technique then that we established our new security notion. So we didn't go out and think there's a new security notion and apply it to the field. We discovered it through the analysis of the data. That's our overarching ethnographic methodology. So what did I then do? So this was long-term field research in a social movement in Kenya, which gave access to a very broad range of activist groups and networks across Kenya, but I was mainly in Nairobi. And I didn't go, so coming back to your question, I didn't go to study these particular protests. I didn't know they were going to happen. I didn't stop them. So I was there from the 3rd of June, and they kicked off. They were announced on the 15th of June, and then they started on 18th of June. So fieldwork coincided with these, and then we have roughly 6.5 months of fieldwork in these particular settings, hanging out every day and building rapport with participants. And what we do as ethnographers is that we hang out. And we do even deep hanging out, which basically means, and this is important for us, that we spend time not just in the spectacular moments, like not just in the street when there is a protest in our case, but we also observe, engage every day. Spend time trying to understand, how do you reason about not just security, but ordinary activities? So this is some pictures both from the protest, but also from different group meetings that you then get involved in. So, okay, so you think like that. So why do you think like that? So it's not just a very narrow view, but it's a more all-encompassing, I would argue, view. Very briefly, what I actually took part in, so whether it was large-scale or small-scale protests, group meetings that were happening, visiting injured protesters in hospital, being at police stations, but also just doing community outreach events or workshops, or just spending a day or every day just sitting in informal settlements and speaking to people, or listening or observing. So a lot of the data are observational data. In addition to that, also did, I think I say 77, ethnographic interviews. Many of you might be familiar with interview studies. Certainly a lot of usable security, or more broadly security studies, use interviews as a method. We do too as ethnographers, as part of our ethnographic toolbox, interviews. But ethnographic interviews are slightly different because they're often characterized by more trust, familiarity between you as the field worker and those you're speaking to, because you are part, for a while at least, as part of the same setting. So a bunch of ethnographic interviews, and through that, of course, we would have ethnographic interview data. So what then happens? So we've got all of this data. Now the challenge is, how do we make this speak to and work for cryptography? I said before about interdisciplinarity. So I'm going to hang on to what makes ethnography ethnography, and so should cryptographers in the room, in this case, in this particular room. And so what we did was we spent a lot of time, first of all, me working with the data, trying to understand what it says, and then having conversations both during, between, and after the fieldwork with the cryptographers. Okay, what does this say? What's it in this data? So iteratively, interpretively, and inductively reasoning about the data. So we didn't, as I mentioned, set out to discover a new security notion, or indeed this one. It was just what emerged from the data. So it doesn't mean that every ethnographic piece of fieldwork would have a new security notion, but we, just to be clear, because I put pressure on other ethnographers. But for us, this was the most logical outcome. Or this was actually what came out of our data, let me put it that way. So reflexivity is really at the heart of ethnographic reasoning, but also we don't apply hypotheses, as I think I also said, but really develop theory from the data. That is really essential. Let me now talk about the findings. So after that iterative analytical process, which takes months to understand and grapple with what is all of this. And as I mentioned, we focused on, for this piece of work, abductions, because it was so stark during this period of time as well. And as I mentioned, abductions emerged, and they really created a very new, I was going to say threat landscape, but a new security outlook as well for those who are engaged with during the field work. So suddenly they had to come to terms with the fact that I might be targeted, I might be taken, and I might not come back. And that was very clear during this time. I'm going to use some quotes from some of those who were abducted, because although I did 77 interviews, 8 of those who I spoke to and who I engaged over days also had been abducted. So the interviews that I'll be using, the quotes I'll be using are from those who had been abducted. And as P51 says here, who was abducted very early on during the protest, says that, yes, we're used to arrests. We know how to handle this. We go, we demonstrate, we get arrested, we get support, we get released on bail. But it had never reached a point where they could torture people or go beyond that. So that was new. And this was constant throughout. So sitting in group meetings, protest meetings, and listening to activist protesters trying to prepare for this scenario. Look, we might be in a situation where we are being taken and we don't know where we're going to be. So let's consider that as we prepare for both going to protest, but also outside of protest settings. So the much more mundane living arrangements, transport arrangements, and finding ways of just going about your everyday lives when this is a threat. So through the analysis that I highlighted before, one thing, a few phases of these abductions became clear or emerged. One was the preparation for how do we prepare. I'll talk through a little bit about that. Also, what were the pattern of abductions? Because that became clear. There was a pattern of these abductions during this particular time. And then finally also, how did protesters, those abducted, try then to protect themselves during abductions? That also became clear during this analytical phase. So, as I mentioned, this was a new threat. They never experienced anything like this before. So in every group meeting, this was the key. We need to stick together. So this collective shared understanding of security, protecting each other, which was kind of already existing, really was strengthened. And we saw new security practices, such as they started moving in groups always, having specific check-in points and controls, moved in with family or friends because where they lived, their homes were being surveilled, but also carrying a clean phone and having several phone numbers with IDs of other people, a link to other people's IDs. So there was a lot that they were trying to prepare for, trying to prepare themselves to protect in the event of potential abduction. And even those who tried to be completely in hiding, still, even in this to this extreme, where they stopped using mobile money, they stopped using WhatsApp, they basically were moved in with friends and family, still they found them. So P37 was abducted and was completely in hiding. And they have been trailing P37 for a week before they took them, just waiting for the order, the abductors told them. And then, so that's a shifting security outlook that we see and different forms of changing security practices. What we then also saw was how these abductions were actually carried out. They're kind of in two stages. So it's the capture and then the interrogation. So the capture was often done by 4 to 8 masked individuals that came under the cover of darkness in a convoy of vehicles. And then, except for P51 and 60, they were taken in or near their home. The first thing they wanted was access to their devices. And if they didn't give them access, they were beaten. And until they gave access, P72 smashed theirs. And then they were blindfolded, their hands were tied, and then they were put into the backseat of the car between their abductors. There are also stories, some of them explained when they tried to ask where they were going, they weren't given answers, and some had the gun shoved in their mouth. So they were feared for their lives. I think it's really important to to really stress, if that's not clear. P22 was abducted on one of the first days of the protests in a similar way that I just suggested with the capture. And then the first thing they wanted P22's phone and wanted access to it. So P22 did not know what was happening. It was one of the first abductions. So at this point, it couldn't prepare and refused to give access. They later gave access when they were in interrogation and at that point were threatened and forced to give up their PIN. And also, one thing that was very clear in the analysis was how, when captured and then later on when they arrived at the house, it's unclear where, they didn't know where they were then taken to an interrogation room and interrogated. And what is really important to understand here is that the abductors or interrogators wanted information from them. During this period, they wanted information about who is funding you, why you're doing this, who is organizing. So the abductors were motivated to get access to this information. And that's really important for what we're going to talk about. As P60 says, they were also forced to give up their password, because if you don't give the right password or you don't give us a password, we will just kill you. And P60 did give the right password. So just before we move on to how they protected more generally, I think this quote is a long quote, but I want to read it out because I think it's quite an essential quote to understand for what we are going to discuss at the end. So P51 was, again, in the early days of the protest, was abducted in a similar fashion to what I just explained, and was then beaten and put into the boot of the abductor's car. They had their phone taken already. And then in the boot of the abductor's car, they feel that they have something vibrating in their pocket. They remember they had this second clean phone. They kill the call, and then they send this very brief message. Hey, I'm being abducted. I don't know where I am. After I texted him, he took a screenshot of the message, posted it on X. So that is how it spread. Funnily enough, after 30 minutes or so, as they, i.e. the abductors, were driving me around, the car stopped again, and then they came out. They opened the trunk, and then they started beating me up. And then they asked me, where is that phone? So they knew that I had another phone because my friend shared my screenshot. I think that is the only thing that saved me, because if it wasn't for that message, these guys had another motive. Because nobody was aware of my abduction apart from that one message. So they could have killed me, taken me to somewhere, nobody could have known. So the fact that I was now out saved me. Yeah? So that one message and when I spoke to this guy, I spoke to him for over 4 hours. I said, oh, no, they knew that you'd messaged. No, that saved me. And why did P51 think that saved them? Well, because getting the message out was step one. Alerting, raising the alarm was step one. But this allowed for shouting to happen. Yeah? So we saw in Kenya during this time that once the message was out about an abduction, people started shouting. And what this created was a feedback loop to the abductors. When the pressure became too much and they realized that now the word was out, they stopped. They dumped the abducted person on the wayside or tried to offload them in a police station. So we really see several examples of how getting the word out and shout created this feedback loop that actually at the end saved the abducted person. And that is really important to understand. This meant that I started practice such as scheduled messages, posts to go out on Twitter, X, in the event of their abduction. And this led us to the last part of this. I hope I'm still okay on time. I'll just do the last part of this. Is then this led us to our at compromise, alert blindness notion. And I will talk through it as an ethnographer. Because if you want to, no, I'll do that at the end. Let me not preempt it. So this security notion captures that when taken, the abducted person can alert their network, as we saw the shouting, or the alert, and then without the adversary noticing that they are alerting their network. And in particular, this is where the ethnographer starts talking about cryptography in some form or shape. Okay, so our protocol. Our setup is this. So we have the person, think of this as an app, not as a phone, and then the server. So you have a PIN, you set up your PIN, that does something, client message. No, but then it goes to the server that stores some information about that message. And then a message is sent back to the app, and that some information is also stored there about that message. So in the normal use, where you use the correct PIN, this happens, and then the app unlocks. Yeah? That is when you use the PIN you've used during the setup, correct PIN. In our project, with the alert, in the protocol with the alert phase, is any other PIN but that correct PIN triggers the server to send out an alarm. Yeah? And as you will see, the app still unlocks. So the only difference between these, once you use any other PIN, is that the server sends out the alert. So what does this capture? Well, first of all, it captures the distinction of compromised people or the devices, the PIN itself, because the person who, we're using the fact that the person who's abducted know that they have been abducted. And they can then choose, when their abductor asks them, I need access to your phone because I need to know who's funding you, they can choose whether to give the correct PIN or not. So the only thing they should not do if they want to protect or get the alert out is to not give the correct PIN. And as we say, they both unlock. So abductors wanted to know who was funding them. So the abductors were motivated to get access. They had to allow a message to go out. Because during this period in Kenya, the reason, the underlying motivated reason, anyway, for the abductions was was intelligence gathering. So they wanted that access to their phone. And that's why they, of course, wanted also to have, they wanted to have access to their phone. So we used that in our protocol. And they were asking questions, but also scrolling through M-Pesa statements or mobile money and WhatsApp messages, or whatever message they had on their phone, contact details. And so we wanted, so in order to get the alert out, what's important is the shouting, as I mentioned before. So in the alert phase, you get the ability to shout. And that is what P51, as we saw in the longer quote, was set to save them. And also, what you might have noticed, that I talked about confidentiality in the previous one, is that we give up confidentiality. Because in both scenarios, whether it's normal use or alert use, the app unlocks. So we give the adversary access to everything on your phone or in the application. And for this, because of this, the reason why we need also to be blind is because our data tells us very clearly that non-cooperation could or would get them killed. So actually not showing that you are cooperating by having the blindness. So that was one of the key findings from our data as well, is that we needed this to be blind. And so yeah, in both cases the app unlocks. Last thought, because to inheriting contextual social problems. But it's very clear from our data that there is a role for cryptography here to play in what we've set out. So it's important to say, I think it's really starting to capture in these field notes from July 24 that bodies were still being found of missing protesters, and many are still, the whereabouts are still unknown. So I just wanted to highlight that. And then lastly, if you want to kind of see more about this side of the story, please do catch Simone's talk on Tuesday. But thank you very much. We got there.
Does anybody have any questions? Even though we already asked some questions there. Please.
Very great, nice talk. Thank you. I wanted to ask if this PIN code is protecting an app on the phone, or is the PIN code of the phone?
App. Sorry,
An
yeah.
app.
I know that the diagram, yeah, it's an app on the phone. So think of it as an app.
Okay, so it's an app that they would want to open, like that has a name or an image that they would be interested in.
Yeah,
something.
we have the protocol. We don't have the app. But,
Okay.
But yeah, so the idea is that it would protect it would be access to it, not the phone, but the app. Yeah.
Okay, yes. Thank you.
Because that is one of the clear things, is that they were motivated to get access to information, not just to the
Yes.
phone. Yeah.
And I guess you don't want them to get suspicious on the app, like, they could at some point figure out.
You mean like they have this particular app that is
Yes.
a protester? No,
Yeah,
think
exactly.
of it much more as integration into existing apps, right? Rather than actually like a separate thing over here. No. It's part of whatever app you have.
I see. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
We had a question here.
Thank you. Technical question. Just one. No, not too technical. just
Ethnographically technical? No, sorry. Yeah, go on.
So, what happens, for example, if the phone is out of reception or is out of? You don't get field signal in that case.
Well, then there's no access to it. So, so the point is that the abductors or the adversary is actually motivated to give you have access, to have the access, because otherwise they can't actually get information from your phone.
All right, this is what I wanted to understand.
Yeah.
So basically, even if you put the right or the wrong pin, collaboration of the server is necessary to unlock
Yes,
the app
yeah,
in any
yeah,
case.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
understood.
Precisely.
The other question is, have you considered a different threat model? For example, how about you have an app with different pins that unlocks different databases? This goes in the concept of plausible deniability, basically.
Oh, okay,
More
but if you
dangerous.
mean like you could show different data depending on
Correct.
different information, yeah. I mean, we're also relying on the fact that the adversary will know have a lot of information about these activists already, and we know that. So they will survey them, they will monitor them in their daily lives. So we can't risk the fact that they're seen not to cooperate. So that's why also you can't just have two different pins either, because actually they will just beat it out of you. We have to assume that they know this protocol exists, and therefore we have to do that in that way. So it's slightly different. But
Thank you.
Okay, we had another question here.
For the talk, my question would be: did you also think about options for biometrics and how to maybe do that? Because a lot of stuff is biometrics.
yeah, I mean, ours is pin-based, and we know that there were some that use biometrics in the setting as access control, but most of them would use pins. But it's a pin-based.
Okay, so this is the end of the session. I would like to thank again Reggae.